Hello and welcome to this general election debate for Maricopa County Recorder. This debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Nohelani Graff, and I'll be moderating today's debate. Our format is going to be a little different today. We're hosting a 30-minute one-on-one discussion since only one candidate has agreed to participate. Republican candidate Justin Heap has declined our debate invitation. Thanks to a partnership with the Clean Elections Commission and the Arizona Media Association, we are working to make sure all 2024 debates are the most accessible in Arizona history. That means this conversation is going to air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. Transparency is critical here, and so that's why this conversation has been designed with input from a broad group of journalists in Arizona representing urban and rural communities. We also want to thank voters across Arizona who have submitted questions as well. We've reviewed all of them to make sure that every voice is heard. However, no candidate has been given advanced access to any of the questions. With that, let's introduce the Democratic candidate, Tim Stringham. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your time today.
So to start, you do have 2 minutes for an opening statement, and the floor is yours.
Sure. Hi, I'm Tim Stringham. I'm a native Arizonan. I was born in Yuma. I'm actually a fifth-generation Arizonan. My family first came actually to Arizona in 1874. In that entire time, people have left Arizona for my family for one reason. That was to serve in the military. So I did grow up during the War on Terror. In 2009, I enlisted in the United States Army. In 2012, I was leading troops in Afghanistan as a counterinsurgency specialist. After doing 6 years in the United States Army, I attended law school at Notre Dame, and then I joined the United States Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps and became an attorney in the Navy, now doing human rights practice where I worked on building programs across Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe that were designed to support rule of law, respect for civilian authority, and peaceful transition of power. I'm running for county recorder because I think elections matter. Not just the outcomes of elections, but the ability for you and I to have a say in our constitutional republic. I'm excited to lead the recorder's office because I think there are a lot of men and women working very hard to make sure that you get your say in our county, and I hope that you'll consider voting for me.
So, Mr. Stringham, you would play an essential role in how future elections are run in a battleground county,
Sure,
in a battleground state. So, of course, it makes this a highly important position. Your challenger, who did participate in the primary among his own party, Mr. Justin Heap, he opted not to debate you this evening. What's your reaction to that, given the implications of this position?
I think it's unfortunate. Campaigns are complicated. You make a lot of gutsy decisions. You get really busy. I have no idea what his strategy is. I certainly don't think the reason that he came here tonight had anything to do with cowardice. Personally, I, even as his opponent, have not actually had much of a chance to hear Justin Heap speak or to know what he intends for this office. I did see on social media that he called the existing county recorder, the current incumbent, a liar, that he said that the department, the elections department, had shared lies and half-truths. I think it's a missed opportunity not to come out here and explain what those lies and half-truths are. I certainly don't know what they are, and I would have loved the opportunity to hear from him.
So on that note, let's just be clear with your stance right off the bat. Do you believe the 2020 election results were fair and accurate?
Yes. The 2020 and 2022 elections were not rigged. I think it's very important we understand that. That doesn't mean that you can't have concerns about the elections. If you have concerns about the elections, we want to hear those concerns. I understand, Stephen Richer understands, the Board of Supervisors understand that there were people who were upset when their voting experience was delayed because the printers weren't working in 2022. That's unfortunate. We always want to find things that we can improve. That doesn't mean that the election was fraudulent. Now, if you think that the election was fraudulent, I do think it is incumbent upon you to prove your case. Now, it has been said that these courts are not the appropriate forum to prove those challenges. Well, a debate stage might have been a good place to outline those complaints. And again, I think it's unfortunate we're not going to hear about that tonight.
One thing that your opponent, Mr. Heap, has said repeatedly on record is he has called election integrity the civil rights movement of our time. Do you agree, or what's your response to that?
Absolutely. I think election integrity is going to be the civil rights movement of every time. We want to make sure that you have the right to participate in your government. We also want to make sure that the right people are participating or not participating in government, right? Elections are for citizens. I've heard criticism that the voter rolls aren't being maintained. I can only see the publicly released data, same as anybody else. We went from over 2.6 million voters 2 years ago down to 2.4 million voters today. What that means is that even in a growing county, we have actually had our voter rolls scrubbed by a net loss of over 200,000 voters. There really truly are people who are working hard to make sure the voter rolls are clean, and I hope that we can have a discussion about that, about how we can do it better, how we can continue to reassure people, but still keep things in perspective.
And let's talk about the voter rolls, because chief among the jobs that you would have, it would be managing those voter rolls. So you have a background in security. How would you apply that, or would you, to maintaining and improving on that process?
Yeah, so we keep a lot of different data on citizens in various different databases and repositories. The county recorder already tries to cross-check as much information as they can. We can talk about different tools, right? We look at social security rolls to see if people have become deceased. There's a tool called ERIC where we can try and see if someone has registered in a different state. The single best tool that we have is you can go on your phone or on your internet browser, type in beballotready.vote. You can update your own voter registration. If you've moved, or if you just want to check on your registration, go to beballotready.vote, update your voter registration, and that will help ensure that your ballot is not sent to the wrong address.
Speaking of being sent to the wrong address, do you believe that vote by mail is essential or unnecessary?
So I enlisted in the United States Army in 2009. I have voted by mail from Afghanistan, Korea, the United Kingdom, and Hawaii. I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity. As a soldier and then later as a United States Naval sailor, that's how I was able to participate in elections here in my home state of Arizona. We have federal protections if you're an overseas voter or if you are a service member. However, those concerns are not unique to service members or overseas families. Here in Arizona, we have an enormous airline industry. If you're a pilot or a flight attendant, you're getting a call at 2 in the morning saying, hey, we want you to go on shift and fly out of state. That might not be something you were able to anticipate 2 months in advance. If you're a police officer and you're about to be called up when you didn't expect it for a 14-hour shift, and when that 14-hour shift might stretch to 16, it might be unreasonable to think that you can months in advance ask for a proxy vote. We have had mail-in voting in Arizona for 30 years. 30 years. It's so popular that 80% of our citizens in the county vote by mail. That number has gone over 90% in certain elections. I think if you're going to have concerns about the mail-in program, that's fantastic, but let's not throw out a great program.
You mentioned a lot of the people that certainly it makes it easier for them because they simply cannot go to a polling place. But as you mentioned, also 80% of the voters did use it in the last election. Are you saying that it should be open, just so we're clear, open to anybody who wants to vote early or get their ballot early, or just should it be narrowed down to people who need to get their ballot early?
I think it should be open for everyone, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. First off, I don't think that voting should be a chore. My wife and I actually like to take time to research our ballot. Here in Arizona, in this county, you are going to have numerous pages on your ballot this year, and I think that you might like the time to sit down at your kitchen island like my wife and I do and think through some of these issues and not feel like you're rushed because there's a line behind you. I think actually taking that extra time to deliberate before you mail your ballot in is a very responsible way of voting, as opposed to walking into the voting booth and then maybe realizing there are some questions you aren't prepared at the moment to answer. There's a cost aspect to this. Right now we have 2.4 million voters on the voter rolls. It is far more expensive to run elections if everyone is voting in person. What we're talking about, if we get rid of mail-in voting, would be equivalent to running 24 Super Bowls simultaneously across the valley. If you're upset that there were printer issues, I assure you, those issues are going to compound if we try to run an election that is 6 times larger than what we currently do on Election Day. We need to be thoughtful about how we spend taxpayer dollars. The Cyber Ninja audit spent $9 million of your money, and it did not produce the results that were expected or intended by the people who started the audit. Before we spend additional taxpayer money, we need to have a very well thought out plan. People want to make sure that we have good public schools and good public safety and not spend millions and millions of dollars to create clogged roadways and long lines at the polls.
In 2007, so about 17 years ago, the state legislature opted for the permanent early voting list, and it was a move that was requested by constituents who didn't want to every year have to add in that they would like their ballot mailed to them and request it over and over every year. Is it time to go back to an annual registration? Do you think that would make people feel better?
I think that's something worth discussing as opposed to getting rid of the mail-in program altogether. So just so you understand what we currently have, the active early voter list, you can maintain your place on the list and automatically receive a mail-in ballot as long as you continue to respond to correspondence to the actual ballots that are mailed to your house. If you miss several election cycles, you're taken off the list. It's critical that we actually do that voter roll maintenance, because if we don't, the county is wasting a ton of money sending out ballots to people who aren't even going to return them. So there's a fiscally responsible argument to be made for cleaning the voter rolls. There's certainly an election security argument for cleaning those voter rolls. If we want to adjust how people get on and off those voter rolls, I think that's a more responsible debate than trying to say wholesale, let's get rid of this program, which is what Justin Heap voted for in the legislature.
And that is one of the concerns and even criticisms that we often hear from voters, is they're worried about people who may get multiple ballots to their home, and what's to stop that person from just go ahead and filling it out, not using the honor system and sending it back. How would you improve that process to make sure that there are not multiple ballots going to a single home?
Great question. I think first it's important that we understand how the system currently is. If you get your ballot by mail, you have to register to vote. For most of us, that means that we go through the Service Arizona website. The state of Arizona, if you have a driver's license, already has your citizenship information or your information for permanent residence. So we already know whether or not you're a citizen. We have your information on file. So that is a secure process right there to vet the voting registration. When you get your ballot, you have to sign, and they will match that signature against the latest 3 signatures in your file. We actually have the same people who train the FBI on signature verification actually verify the signatures on your ballot. But we have further protections as well. Every single green envelope has a barcode on it. If you get multiple envelopes and you try to send back multiple ballots, they will not all count. You can only have 1 ballot counted per voter. Again, that's tracked by the barcode. But again, if you have concerns, there's a really great tool here. Go to beballotready.vote. My wife and I have been using it for years. The tool allows us to know when our ballot is printed, when it's mailed to us, when it's returned, and when it's tabulated. If somebody else were to vote my ballot, I would get an announcement, and I could call the county recorder's office and try to make sure that that vote didn't count, and the security of my own vote is what actually counted in that election.
Another thing that is available to the public is touring McTech, the Tabulation and Election Center in downtown Phoenix. Have you gone and taken the tour?
Yes, I have. I originally got involved in the county recorder race in a somewhat tangential way. There's a fantastic organization called Vet the Vote. It's a nonpartisan nonprofit group, and they try to get people who are veterans involved in the election processes. I went along with that group last September, and I toured the facility. If you're not able to get down to the tabulation center, you can also take the same tour online. They have a video of it that's posted and available through the recorder's website. But again, if you have concerns, I think that's fantastic. You should not just trust what your government has to say. Go take the tours. To the best of my knowledge, Justin Heap has not been down to the tabulation center. I'm sure that you can take the tour and still have questions, but I think if you're going to try and apply for this job, you need to take the time to do the research. So what I've done over the last year is I've taken the tour, I've talked to elections officials, I sat down with the incumbent, Stephen Richer, I sat with the last county recorder, Adrian Fontes, and if in the office, every single day, we'll try and set aside time where I can continue to learn something new.
Did you see any areas for improvement when you took the tour, or did you have any questions after taking it?
Sure. I think we know that threats in national security are dynamic. They change every single day. And so absolutely, I think we need to be very aware that software can change, cyber threats can change, physical threats can change. And so, you know, in the military, we would do random anti-terrorism measures, random security measures. We would respond to known threats, and we would try to respond to unknown threats by being unpredictable in some ways. There's a reason why we don't publish the location of polling locations months in advance. There's a reason why we try to protect people's identities. There's a reason why we have partisan observers come in and watch the processes to make sure that they're fair. And there's a reason we coordinate with law enforcement. Absolutely, there are things in the office that I think could be improved. You know, we saw some of those concerns earlier this year. How you handle key maintenance is important. How you actually maintain chain of custody, that's important. A lot of people have been concerned about ballot box security. I still have questions about those. And I think it's important that we have those questions. We just need to have them in a thoughtful, considerate manner.
Of those questions, have you also come up with any vision for how you would improve them, say with the ballot box concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of concerns about unmanned ballot boxes. And I think we have to have some consideration for where we put those ballot boxes, how those ballot boxes are monitored, what things can be put into the ballot box, whether those ballot boxes have flame suppression capabilities to them, which actually postal boxes have. So there are all these little sort of nerdy ways that you can think about every single challenge in the system, and there's no one set solution to a lot of these problems. The solution that we have today might not be the same solution tomorrow. When I'm the county recorder, we'll dive into that nitty-gritty. One of the things that you might not be aware of is that we have national security experts from CISA and other federal agencies actually come down to the Maricopa County Center every single year. Secretary of State Adrian Fontes actually held a war game where they actually mapped out an election and came up with different challenges and tried to test exactly how different elections departments would handle those challenges. So we'll get creative. We'll apply that dynamic planning process and test our capabilities and try and prepare for different scenarios.
Part of your job would also require advocating for money for the budget. You would go to the Board of Supervisors. So where do you see the need to spend to grow staff? What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is our poll workers are incredible. They're really working long hours. Folks, if you've never worked a poll, I encourage you to do it. There's a job for everybody, but a lot of the folks who are working at the polls are really working long hours. They're working 14-hour days, and they're getting paid about $15 an hour for it, and many of them doing it on a volunteer basis. I'd love to increase that level of pay. I'd love to have pay for a higher percentage of those workers. I'd love to have retention programs. One of the things that I would like to see is a survey program so that every single person who works on the poll has the ability or is asked to take a survey and relay their experiences at the end of the night. My understanding is right now we sample poll workers. I think every single poll worker should be asked to take a survey and tell us what we can do better.
A more uniform debrief, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. We are blessed to have thousands of people, not hundreds, but thousands of people who work on our elections. That's a lot of different perspectives. What works at one poll site might not work at another poll site. One polling location might be great. You might have issues with the accessibility of another polling location. We want all of that feedback. And I think it's important to know that currently the Elections Department answers to both the Recorder and the County Board of Supervisors. I think that's a great thing. I think it's important that we have a broader set of people who are responsible for our elections, so there's no single point of failure, and everybody should be looking at all of these angles and trying to watch each other so that you're getting, not a single faceted look at how our elections are run.
Now, of course, elections get the most attention out of this office, but there are other duties of the county recorder, processing about 1 million documents a year, including plats and deeds. Recently, the office has rolled out Title Alert to prevent deed fraud, recording kiosks to submit forms without having to go to the downtown offices, and also a new website is launching to support online document searches. First, are you tech savvy? Because that's a lot to learn.
Tech savvy is a tough question, actually, because anybody who works in technology or has used technology on a day-to-day basis knows that that's not an endpoint. That's a journey. You have to update it every single year. You can't ever wake up and say, oh, I know all of the technology. You've really got to work every day to continue to educate yourself. If I could return to the point of deed fraud, there is a growing phenomenon, still uncommon, thankfully, where someone will falsely record a deed in your name. So I actually sat down with someone who is a real estate agent, and she saw on an MLS listing that her father's house had sold while her father was elderly and had no plans on selling the house. She actually called the police, went down to her father's house, saw that the house had been emptied. There was a realtor's lockbox on the door, and the police said, you no longer own this house. You need to remove yourself from the premises. She had to get an attorney. She had to prove that the actual documents transferring ownership of the house were fraudulent. The house within a 24-hour period had been sold to Zillow. The company Zillow helped facilitate the return of the house to the proper owner. Now, that might not be a common occurrence, but if that happens to you, that is an absolute nightmare scenario, and you could be talking about tens of thousands of dollars in a multi-year battle to get your home back. As the county recorder, I think it's important that we do some white-collar crime training. We need to try and do a better job, to the best job we can, of screening documents and see if we can actually find, okay, well, are there indicia of white-collar crime? Is there indicia of fraud here such that we can stop your house from being stolen before it starts? And if I could talk about Title Alert.
I was going to say it's getting traction, but there is still a lot of education to be done. So how would you alert more people to what it is and get them to utilize?
Yeah, just like BeBallotReady.vote, the county recorder, started under Stephen Richer, has a really great program called Title Alert. You can sign up for Title Alert and you can get a text message or an email alert that will tell you if something is recorded in your name. What that means is that if my townhouse in Tempe were sold tomorrow, I would get an alert saying, hey, there was a deed that amends the ownership of something owned by Tim Stringham. If I look at that and I didn't sell my house that day, I can immediately, within that 24-hour period, see if I can try and stop that documentation from going through. The challenge with Title Alert is it is inherently post hoc. We want to stop these things before they happen. And so we know that titles can be transferred multiple times even in a single day. That's important. We don't want to slow down business. We want realtors in this valley to continue to do business, but we also want to protect you as a homeowner. So please sign up for Title Alert. But also, I think there's some things that we can hopefully do to improve processes in the realm of prevention going forward.
The current county recorder has been very active on social media as his tool to try and reach out to people and respond. How do you feel about the use of social media? Would you utilize it to try and educate people about all the different things within the recorder's office?
Yeah, social media is great. Social media is a fantastic tool. It's also scary. Communication is difficult, right? If you're just saying things in 280 characters, it's really easy to come off as smug, arrogant, aggressive. I think we all know that if you're on Twitter, it can be a very negative place. And so there's a challenge about how do we educate, how do we reach people where they are, but yet have a frank, honest discussion. And I was just discussing it with somebody earlier today. Even for this campaign, I try to protect myself from not going on social media. I have a young individual in my campaign who's social media savvy. He's the one who runs that platform. And I try to institute barriers to make sure he's not on there too often. And that's why you're not going to see a ton of updates on my campaign account. I think it's very important at times that we log off of social media and go get some sunshine in Arizona. Again, that doesn't mean it's not an effective tool. I think it's critical that we continue to be transparent. I just want to make sure that we're using those tools in a responsible manner.
Yeah, because when it comes to transparency, ultimately, that is what people are calling for. You mentioned the court cases specifically in regards to elections, and yet people still feel like something goes wrong every time. So how do you reach them and convince them?
So first off, we did polling on this. 60% of people in Maricopa County are actually of the feeling that our elections are safe and secure. That's a pretty great number, folks. If you look at Congress, the numbers are down in the 12% range, right? Don't tell the county elections that they're doing a terrible job. Let's tell the politicians they need to do a better job. If I were working on day one, what I'm going to say to my team as the county recorder is, folks, I want you to be proud of the job you're doing. You should be proud of the job that you've done. Now let's find ways to get better every single day, right? Can we push it up next year to 65%? Can we go to 67%? Can we be honest when we do make mistakes? When you're running an election for 2.4 million people, a printer might break, right? We've had movies made about printers breaking. It is a common phenomena in the world of technology that sometimes the technology doesn't work. Let's be honest about it. Let's plan as much as we can. Let's war game. Let's test the things and retest the things. And let's see if we can't do better. And if we can push those numbers up over a 4-year period, I think that'd be fantastic.
Last one before we get to your closing statements and a very brief answer. Should the office of recorder be a partisan position? Such
a great question. And, it's weird for me as a service member to be in politics. And I've spent my entire career in nonpartisan office. You do not have a partisan agenda when you're talking to a soldier or a sailor. The number one question I get is, why is the elections even a partisan position? I think that's a fantastic question. I would love the legislature to answer that. I don't think you can have a partisan agenda and run our elections and expect people to not have concerns. I don't think that you can make it a partisan elected position and expect that the other political party is not going to criticize you to try and get an electoral disadvantage. We have to look at the incentive structure. Incumbent Stephen Richer is now the second county recorder in a row to lose his election even while he's running the office.
Thank you.
I think we need to take a look at how we can improve the system going forward.
And I want to make sure that we do get to your closing statement, so you do have 1 minute now.
First off, thanks to everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. Elections matter, and what I always say is that they're about hope. You might not win this year. The person that I'm voting for might not win this year, but you should know that there's another election in the future, that if you can have a tough conversation with your neighbors and change their minds, you can win the next election. And that's what I want to give you, is the belief that you've got someone trustworthy in the office. I've served 15 years in the U.S. military, and you never have to worry if I'm going to show up for you. I've been to war for you to defend your rights, and I'm going to keep doing it as county recorder.
And Mr. Stringham, we do want to say thank you for your service.
Thank you so much.
That is all the time that we have for today's one-on-one conversation for Maricopa County Recorder. On behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister and Bitfire Studios, we thank you for joining us.